All right, if you're here with us, you're probably ready to take your English speaking skills up a notch. And hey, who isn't, right?
That's right. And today we're doing a deep dive into a real-life English podcast episode. They're all about fluency tips, and we'll break it down and get those strategies working for you.
Yeah, so you can ditch those textbooks and just start speaking more confidently.
Exactly. You know what I really like about the episode? They take a fresh look at things. We're not just talking grammar rules here. We're getting into like the psychology of speaking, the mindset, all those habits that can hold us back or, propel us forward. Right?
Totally. And they get right into it. They address the fear of making mistakes right off the bat. I mean, that's huge for so many English learners.
Yeah. And the way they reframe it is really cool. It's like, mistakes aren't failures, they're feedback.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like every time you stumble, it's actually a chance to learn, They even say push through that hesitation, use simpler words, or even describe the word you can't remember just to keep talking.
Don't let a little stumble trip you up. Just keep going.
That's the idea. And that leads us to one of the coolest things they talk about, thinking in English.
That sounds a bit intimidating, doesn't it?
It can, but the episode actually breaks it down and makes it doable.
Like how?
Well, they suggest things like describing your day in English. Doesn't even have to be out loud, just in your head. Or like naming the objects you see around you.
Oh, I see.
The key here is to do it straight in English, not translating from your native language.
Got it.
Because that translation, that's like a mental speed bump on the road to fluency, right?
Yeah.
When you think directly in English, you're basically rewiring your brain and you process the language faster.
So you're switching the brain's operating system over to English mode.
I like that analogy. And they even suggest taking some time each day, like when you're on your commute, to just think in English.
I can try that.
And, speaking of mimicking native speakers, they bring up this technique called shadowing.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So it's basically listening to a native speaker, and then you try to copy them. Their pronunciation, their intonation, everything.
So you're like becoming their shadow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's more than just repeating. It's like absorbing the music of how they speak.
So your ears and mouth are learning to work together smoothly.
Right. And they explain that this helps you internalize the flow of English, so when you speak, you sound more natural and confident.
Makes sense. So what do they recommend shadowing? Like podcasts?
Podcasts, for sure. But also YouTube videos, TED Talks. They even suggest shadowing your favorite movie scenes.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Right. Make it enjoyable. They really stress that. And you can choose content that focuses on certain things you want to improve, like intonation or specific sounds.
So it's kind of like a personalized workout for your pronunciation. But what about actually speaking with a real person? I mean, not everyone has an English-speaking friend to practice with.
Absolutely. And the episode gets it. They know not everyone has that luxury and offer some solutions, different things people can try.
Like what?
Well, there are language exchange apps, for one. Those are great for connecting with people from all over. Then you have all these online communities and forums for English learners.
Right, I've seen those.
They even suggest using AI chatbots.
Chatbots? Really?
Yeah, sounds a little out there maybe, but they can be surprisingly helpful.
I'm not sure about that. I guess I'd feel a bit awkward chatting with a bot.
Yeah, I get that. But, they make a good point. Chatbots are just tools. And like any tool, it's all about how you use them.
Sure enough.
Yeah. So they recommend you start small.
Yeah.
Simple conversations, maybe focus on particular grammar points or words you want to practice, and then you can make it more challenging as you get better.
So it's like using them strategically to get in some extra practice.
Exactly. Plus, there's no pressure. It's a safe space to experiment and make mistakes.
Yeah, I can see that. No one's judging you. So, okay, we've talked about mindset, thinking in English, even shadowing, and now chatbots. But what about those times when, your mind goes blank and you just can't think of the word? Or when you feel like your accent's holding you back?
Don't worry, the real-life episode tackles those common challenges head on.
Yeah.
And they give you some practical tools to deal with them.
Okay, good. What kind of tools?
Well, when you can't remember a word, they say use simpler words or just try to describe the word. It's more important to be clear and get your message across than to sound super native.
Right, that makes sense.
And about accents, they say focus on clarity. Work on your intonation and stress patterns because that makes a huge difference in how well people understand you.
So it's about making sure your message comes through loud and clear.
Precisely. And they even recommend recording yourself speaking and listening back to it. You can catch things you might not notice otherwise.
Like being your own coach.
Exactly. But all these techniques are great, but the episode really hammers on the importance of consistency.
Consistency.
Yeah, that's where their daily practice challenge comes in. They call it the secret weapon for fluency.
Okay. Color me intrigued. What's this challenge all about?
Well, it's a simple 3-step routine that you do every day for a week, and they say you'll see a real difference.
A week, huh? I could probably do that. So what are the steps?
First, you record yourself speaking for just 1 minute, whatever comes to mind. Let those words flow.
All right, step 1 down. What's next?
Step 2 is listening and shadowing. Pick a 1-minute clip from a native speaker and shadow it at least 3 times, paying attention to their pronunciation and rhythm.
So it's like a super concentrated fluency workout.
Exactly. And finally, step 3, this is where you actually get to speak with someone. It could be a language partner, someone from an online group, or even one of those chatbots we were talking about.
So it combines practicing solo with actually using the language in a real conversation.
Exactly. It's a well-rounded approach to building fluency. You know what really struck me about this challenge? It doesn't take hours of practice. It's about making small changes to your daily routine. Make fluency just a part of life, you know?
So don't wait for the perfect time. Just make time every day, even if it's just a few minutes here and there.
Exactly. The episode makes it clear. Consistency is key. It beats those crazy bursts of effort any day. It's about building up that fluency little by little.
You know, we were talking about using AI chatbots earlier, and some people might still be a little hesitant about that. Talking to a computer just feels a little strange, right?
I totally get that.
Yeah.
But, you know, the episode does a good job of clearing up some of those chatbot myths. They make a good point. They're just tools, and any tool can be used well or poorly, right?
So we need to learn how to use them effectively.
Exactly. They suggest using them for focused practice, maybe working on specific grammar or vocab. And, you know, they see chatbots as a safe space. You can try things out, make mistakes, and there's no judgment.
Kind of like having a personal tutor who's always available.
Right. And they highlight how accessible chatbots are, especially for people who maybe don't have other ways to practice speaking.
It's definitely a useful thing to have in your learning toolkit.
Absolutely. You know, let's switch gears for a second and talk about something else a lot of English learners deal with. Accents. The episode has some interesting thoughts on that.
I'm all ears. What do they have to say?
They really emphasize that being clear and understandable is way more important than sounding like a native speaker. They actually say that different accents are a natural part of language. It makes communication richer, you know?
So it's not about losing your accent. It's about making sure people can understand you.
Exactly. And they give tips on how to be clearer, like focusing on how your voice goes up and down, the intonation, and where you put stress on words. Those things make a big difference.
Makes sense. So you don't have to sound like a native speaker to be a good communicator.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, they encourage people to see their accents as part of who they are, not something that's holding them back.
I like that. It's about being comfortable with your own voice.
That's the idea. Before we finish up our look at this episode, I want to go back to something we mentioned earlier, mindset.
Right. They talked a lot about that.
And for good reason. It's really important in language learning, and they give some great tips for developing a positive attitude, you know, an attitude that's all about growing.
What are some of their key points about mindset?
Well, they want people to see mistakes as chances to learn and improve, not as failures. And challenges, those are just stepping stones to fluency. They say you should celebrate every bit of progress you make.
So it's about going from a fear of messing up to a love of learning.
Exactly. And they're big on patience and persistence. Fluency is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right. And they give practical advice on how to stay motivated, like setting realistic goals, finding a group of people who are also learning, and just enjoying the process.
So you're creating a positive learning environment for yourself.
Right. Okay, as we get to the end of this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question they ask in the episode. It really got me thinking.
Okay, I'm curious. What's the question?
They ask, what if, instead of being afraid of making mistakes, you saw them as like stepping stones to fluency?
Wow. That really makes you think, doesn't it? It's about changing how we see those mistakes, seeing them as a positive part of learning.
That's it. And it encourages us to have fun with the language, be curious, instead of being so self-critical.
So we're shifting our focus from perfection to progress.
Exactly. And with that, I think we've really covered the main points of this Real Life English episode.
We definitely have. We looked at a bunch of practical techniques, thinking in English, shadowing, finding new ways to get speaking practice, and even embracing our accents.
We also went deep into the importance of mindset, how a positive attitude can make all the difference when you're learning.
And don't forget about consistency. Even small steps every day add up to big progress.
And finally, we talked about how to see mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow, instead of something to be afraid of.
Before we move on to our final thoughts, let's just take a second to reflect on what we've learned. What really stood out to you?
For me, it was the power of thinking in English. It seems so simple, but it can really change how fluent and confident you feel.
I agree. And I'm also really interested in using those AI chatbots for practice. It's just so convenient and everyone can do it.
And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be okay with your accent. Focus on being clear and understandable. That's what matters most.
Totally. It's about communicating and connecting, not about trying to be perfect.
Exactly. So with that in mind, let's move on to our final thoughts and wrap this up.
Okay, so we've unpacked a lot of great advice from this Real Life English episode. But if you had to pick just one golden nugget, something to tell someone who wants to improve their speaking, what would it be?
That's a tough one. There's so much good stuff. But honestly, I think the most important thing is to just start speaking. Don't wait till you feel perfectly ready or until your grammar is flawless. Just dive in, embrace those little imperfections, and get those conversations going.
It's like that saying, you can't learn to swim without getting in the water.
Right. And they really encourage finding ways to speak English every single day, whether it's with a language partner, a chat bot, even talking to yourself.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get those words out there. Practice makes perfect, as they say.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned that think in English thing really clicked for you. I'm curious why that one stood out.
I think it's because it gets at something so many English learners struggle with, that habit of translating everything in our heads. When you can shift to thinking directly in English, it's like you're removing that mental barrier, and your thoughts can flow so much more naturally.
That's a great point. It's like creating a direct link between your thoughts and your speech. No more translation detour.
Yeah, exactly. And the episode gives some good tips on how to do that, like describing your surroundings in English or even having conversations with yourself, all in English.
Those are great examples. And it shows that you don't need a fancy classroom or a partner to practice this. You can literally do it anywhere, anytime.
It's about making English a part of your everyday life, even when you're not actively speaking out loud.
Yeah, totally. And before we wrap up, those AI chatbots we talked about, I think they deserve a little more attention.
Yeah, it's a pretty new thing, and I'm sure some people are still wondering if they actually work.
Well, the episode sees them as a really useful tool for focused practice. Like if you want to work on specific grammar points, vocab, or pronunciation.
And they're just so accessible and convenient. Not everyone has the chance to practice with a real person all the time.
Right. Plus, it's a safe space, no judgment. You can try things out, make mistakes, and just build your confidence.
It's like having a language coach in your pocket, 24/7.
Exactly. So as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. Remember, fluency isn't a finish line you cross. It's more like a journey, It's about exploring, discovering, and constantly growing. Embrace those challenges, celebrate your progress, and most of all, enjoy the process.
That's a great way to put it. Fluency isn't about reaching some kind of perfection. It's about having fun while you learn and connect with others through language.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep those conversations flowing.
And who knows, maybe someday you'll be the one sharing your own fluency tips and inspiring others on their journey.